bring up your next guest. Perfect. So I have another Dr. Tom Orent, who also is helping battle spoiled guac PPO. Dr. Tom's been a sponsor and guest on previous shows, just like our other guest here today. So Dr. Tom, tell us what you do.
Well, Dr. Nacho, thanks for having me.
Sure.
I help dentists to get out of PPOs without losing all their patients, slow themselves down a little bit, have more fun, do more of their best dentistry, make more money, and work at least one less day per week than they were before that all started happening.
I like that. I like you can use, we kind of have a lot of shared thoughts. I start off lectures. I say, hey, who here's a dentist? Who wants to be happier, make more money? Keep your hand up. Who wants to work more? And 100 hands go down at once. So I like that you lead with that. Tell us a little bit about, you are getting dentists to do, Dr. Tom, what they don't like to do, make a change, have things be different. So what is one of your success stories? Because I know you have a lot through your GEMS program where you say, hey, I got somebody to make this change, relinquish their relationship with PPOs in some way, and now they're living their best dentistry life.
So that's a great question, and I'm not going to be answering that for you today.
No problem.
I know you emailed me and said, come up with somebody, and I've been doing this for 21 years, as you can tell from my voice, which is a permanent problem with my voice, but you know what? Still having a great time doing it. And so instead of just telling you about hundreds of dentists or even one of them from the last 21 years, I decided to give you something you can actually take actionably and use right now.
Sure, I like that.
So it's going to be 8 gems in 7 minutes for a $250,000 increase in simple crown and bridge.
I like that.
You ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Number one, do the math. If you added just one quadrant, 3 or 4 crowns or implants or whatever it happens to be, but you're working one quadrant, you prep it, and then you place it the next time. If you added just one quadrant a week more than you're currently doing, let's say it was $5,000, that's $250,000 a year.
Yeah.
If you're a solo doc and you're already doing $1.5, $2 million, $3 million, you're probably prepping multiple quadrants in the week. So maybe you don't need this, but if you're not doing several quadrants a week, but you are comfortable doing quadrant dentistry and just want to get, how do you get more? Then we go to number 2. First thing is, who's the person in your practice who's doing the diagnosis saying, yeah, Mrs. Jones, these 4 teeth need XYZ, and who's actually talking to the patient about it? If it's the doctor, they think you need a new Mercedes. And if they're asymptomatic, your conversion rate, your acceptance rate is going to be pretty low. We suggest, and what we do is we train the hygienist, and the hygienist then basically says, look, I'm not a doctor. I can't diagnose. I can't treatment plan, but I've been with Dr. Nacho for 8 years now, and I can tell you exactly what he's going to say when he walks in the room, and then they go into their whatever it is that they're going to do. So they've got graphics, they've got verbal skills, which takes me into number 3, which is create a system and train your team, train your hygiene team and the assistants on a series of graphics and verbal skills. What would you say to this patient who is asymptomatic, so that by the time the doctor does walk in the room, and you got to do that verbal skill training, not every week, maybe once every month or 2, but it needs to be done outside of patient time.
For sure.
So set aside some time when you're in your practice to work on your practice. And for our guys, we recommend a minimum of 30, preferably 90 minutes a week, just working on different things in the practice to improve them. Slow down and do better, do less dentistry. Do more better dentistry, but less crazy busyness.
Yeah.
You won't be the crying dentist on your, I love your stick figure, by the way. That's
beautiful. Beautiful artwork. But what we do, I'm a high level artist, fee for service artist here.
It's amazing. That looked like a DSO artist. But anyway. So the next thing, number 4, and this comes from Wayne Gretzky. Gretzky said, and everybody knows this, he said, you miss 100% of the shots you never take. You miss 100%. So if you believe in your heart that this would be best for the patient, this being those 3 or 4 teeth in that quadrant and doing whatever that is, whether it's crowns or implants or whatever they need, if that's what you believe they need, then set aside insurance from your mind for a moment. Set aside whether you think the patient could afford it. Set aside what you even think the patient's reaction is going to be, and just make the suggestion. If you do this consistently and you have a systematic way of doing it, you will see acceptance.
Awesome.
Our guys typically see a minimum of 1 per dentist per week, and you're talking about a quarter of 1 patient because that's only 1 quadrant. Many of our guys are doing multiple quadrants a week, whereas before they were doing 1 and 2 tooth dentistry, whatever their insurance would cover.
Right.
Number 5, Cialdini, Dr. Robert Cialdini, his contrast principle is amazing. If you start recommending quadrants, and let's say that quadrant is $5,000, and let's say Mrs. Jones says, I had no idea it was going to be that much. I know I got to get something done. I'm really concerned about those teeth because Mary told me this, but the 5,000, even with a payment plan, I can't do it. Then the contrast principle says, then drop down to 2 teeth. And which of the 2 do you think are more important? Maybe it's the 2 molars because of the fulcrum and where all that pressure happens. We don't want those 2 teeth to crack.
Yeah.
And so you drop down to 2, whereas you were probably going to do 1. Now you're doing 2 or 4 as opposed to 1.
John Coyce used to say it was very similar. Why do they sell Rolexes in the airport? To make the other watches seem less expensive. So it's just a really good frame for people to have choices. So I think that's really a great point there. And I think, Tom, as you go through, you should teach this to DSOs and dental schools so we can bond them all together. There's some DSOs doing great work out there, so they could use your help. So we'll be glad to connect you. They sound like great principles for the dental student to the dentist practicing for 43 years to use.
You're right. You're right. It doesn't matter where you are. If you're a dentist and you're still practicing, whether you're 36 or 63, you can apply this. Number 6 is another one of the uses of Cialdini's contrast principle, and that is the doctor isn't necessarily getting into fees. This is exactly this and this is exactly that, and they shouldn't work out the payment plans. But before I leave the room, I want to at least give a ballpark so that I don't walk out of the room and leave my team to talk to the patient who says, yeah, I wanted to do that. And they find out how much it was. And they said, I can't possibly do that. I had no idea.
Yeah.
So before leaving the room, just give a ballpark. If I think it's going to be $5,000, I'm not going to say 5,000. If in my head I say, okay, these 4 teeth, that's about 5. What I'm going to do is increase it 10 or 15% in my mind. So I'm going to go to, let's say, 5,500 or so. And then I'm going to get a range up from that. So if I know it's 5,000 in my head, I'm going to say, Mrs. Jones, I don't know exactly. Isabel's going to put it into the computer in a minute for you, but I can tell you roughly you're looking at 5,500, maybe 6,000. She'll work it out. She'll put it in the computer, and I'm sure she'll work out something that's comfortable for you. Now, having said that, they go out to Isabel afterwards. She puts it into the computer, and she says, I see Dr. Orent made a note that he said it was somewhere between 55 and 6,000. Actually, he was doing that in his head, and he was off by a bit. And then she pauses because, of course, the patient's thinking it's going to be more. And then she says it was actually 5,000. And in fact, many of our patients appreciate and take advantage of the prepayment courtesy. It would save you 5%, which would be $250 off of that. So it'd actually be $4,750 if you'd like to take advantage of that. So bear in mind, they heard 55 to 6,000, but they heard the 6,000. That's the last thing they heard. And now we're down to $4,750 for the same case because we use a contrast principle twice. We're up to number 8 because I know I don't have much time left.
That's good. These are great tips.
Well, you gave me 7 or 8 minutes, so I'm giving you 8 tips in 7 minutes. Number 8. All of this will work. If you deploy exactly what I just said, it will work. With every patient, of course not, but with more patients than you're currently doing quadrant dentistry on. The only way it'll work is if you have multiple ways that they can pay for it over time. One of the things that we train our members on is internal long-term financing. In fact, I think I wrote about that in your forum about 4 months ago. In a lot of detail. So internal long-term financing, it can be done while mitigating the risk. It can be done while looking at all the numbers and titrating it to exactly how much risk you want to take. But to step away from internal long-term financing, last night we were doing a mastermind with my Freedom Summit members, and one of our members, Monica Capelli, shared a huge thing that I had never heard about. So I'm going to share it with you and give her credit.
Awesome.
Credit where credit was due. She said that in addition to doing internal long-term financing, and of course, they had been using Care Credit, but Care Credit's good, but the fee is very high to the dentist, and Care Credit has to be very careful. So they actually turn down a fairly high percentage of the patients who you send. So I said to Monica, well, what did you find that you're finding it even more helpful than Care Credit? And she said, we're now using Proceed Finance. It's PROCEED, Proceed Finance and Sunbit Financing. And she said that those guys are way more amenable to working with people with lower credit scores, and they charge the patient reasonable rates, and they charge the dentist.
Sunbit is an awesome sponsor for our group. One of the things, like financing companies, just like restaurants in Philadelphia, not all of them are designed to have 2 kids under the age of 7 like mine in it. So each financing company comes in different flavors. I find they embrace their business models and do what they want to do. So those are awesome 8 tips, Tom. If someone is inspired to do this, not miss the shots they don't take. I hope there's a NBA Senior League for me one day. How can they reach out to you to do that?
Okay, so I'm so glad you asked that. If they want to reduce their dependence on PPOs and add $250,000 a year, work one day less, and find a whole lot of ways to do that pretty simplistically, pretty easily, I have actually set aside some time in my schedule to speak with you personally,
Awesome.
Talk to you about the practice. We'll be on the phone for about an hour. If at the end of that, I think that I could be of help, we can talk about how that might look. If not, I'll do whatever I think I could do for you, which would serve you best.
Great.
Regardless, that 60 minutes is going to be the best 60 minutes you put into your practice. And they can find my schedule at Freedom Summit Coaching. That's freedomsummitcoaching.com.
Awesome. Thanks, Tom. You're a great resource. You bring some spicy toppings up on the group. We appreciate your sponsorship and friendship. Thanks so much for sharing.
Thank you, Paul.